Hi and welcome back to part 2 of this tutorial. In the first episode I showed you how to create your own molds, and now that they're ready you can move on to pouring your resin and creating your coasters. But before you can do any of that you need to complete some simple preparations to make your first pour run as smoothly as possible. First, grab a bin liner, just a single bin liner will do, and spread it out flat at the end of your table. You'll need this ready for placing your sticky resin cups and sticks at the end of your pour. Next, make sure your table is level so your resin dries flat. To pop any bubbles that rise to the surface, you'll need just one of these tools. I've got this selection for you, but you'll only need one of these. So these are gas torch lighters, and the flame from the end pops the resin bubbles. So I've got two sizes here, one smaller than the other. So it looks intimidating, and if you're not comfortable with these, you could use a heat gun. So now on to safety instructions, and please do not skip this step. Open any windows possible in the room you're working in and grab yourself a good quality dust mask to protect your lungs from breathing in any resin fumes. Second, you'll need a good stock of disposable gloves, and this step is very important too because of the risk of allergic reactions. And also, resin is very sticky and cannot be washed off with just soap and water. Only pure isopropyl alcohol will get that sticky mess off your hands. So to avoid this, always wear gloves. I recommend you use disposable cups and cutlery, and most of us have these lying around the house. Otherwise, it's easy to find and relatively inexpensive to buy from your local supermarket. And I also use recycled yogurt pots. I have some small plastic teaspoons and wooden sticks for stirring your resin. And I use this silicone spatula I bought from the homewares section of my supermarket. But if you don't have this, use a disposable wooden or plastic knife. It just needs to be long and sturdy enough to mix your resin correctly. For beginners, I highly recommend buying a set of mica powders and glitters. These are particularly cost effective because you have a great selection of colours, almost any colours you'll need. It's easier and cheaper than buying individual pots, but if you've already got some mica powders and glitters at home, use that too. I've chosen mica powders because of the gorgeous shimmer. Pigments are not the same. They are mostly matte, and sometimes they come in shimmery format. You can also use acrylics, but I recommend you use a high flow acrylic or pour acrylics that are looser in texture and mix better in resin. I'm using these pour paints in a box with a great selection of colours, and some of them are shimmery. For today I'm going to choose just 2 colours, including a white, but you could use 3 colours, 2 of them in the same tonal range, and the other white or transparent. Once again, to save on working time, prepare your pigments and glitters in the cups before mixing your resin. When it comes to mixing small quantities of pigments, I prefer these small little cups. As you can see, they've already been used, but they're completely dried up, so any new resin or pigments won't mix with each other, and that will be perfectly fine to use. So I'm going to be using some raspberry red. This is a pigment mica powder. And I'm going to be adding 1 teaspoon, around 1 flat teaspoon into this cup. In goes a little stirring stick, and you want individual stirring sticks for each colour. And instead of using a new spoon each time, I'm simply going to wipe it off and go into the next colour, which is the pearl white mica powder. And again, you want about a flat level teaspoon of it. That's 2. Wipe off again. And for a little shimmery glow in the centre, I'm going to be using some bubblegum glow, and you can see it's got a slight little pink tinge to it, a little glimmer, a little shine. And this is lovely for just at the centre of your geode coasters. We'll only need a little of this, so a half a teaspoon will do. There. Once again we wipe off. A little sticking side there for that one. And then I'm going to be using for the center a little bit of champagne gold glitter. I'm going to open the bigger side of it, so it comes in two sides, a sprinkle side and a fast pouring side. And I'm going to be adding 1 heaped teaspoon of this. And these lids come with the actual colour at the top so that you don't contaminate another pot with a different colour. For the acrylic, give it a good shake. And for this one I'm going to try this metallic red wine. It's a really gorgeous colour. So for this I'm just going to squirt in that much. I don't know if you can see, that much. And you don't really need much paint when it comes to these acrylics. Put these to the side for later. And now for my step-by-step guide on mixing your resin. I'm using craft resin, and I chose this resin for this tutorial because it's easy to use, it's non-toxic, and it's a 1-to-1 ratio, which makes it much easier to mix. So you basically mix equal amounts of part A and part B. And this is their starter kit. It comes with a pair of gloves and a little stirring stick, so that will make things easier for you if you're a first timer. So a quick resin lesson for total beginners. Curing. When we talk about curing or curing times, we mean the process of the resins drying from liquid to hard plastic. So resin starts off liquid, as you can see in these tins, and it cures solid. So it shouldn't be bendy after the recommended curing time, which in this case is 24 hours. If yours is still bending or soft to the touch, you've either not measured correctly your resins or you've not mixed it for the correct amount of time. The correct amount of time for each resin changes and is different, but for this particular resin it's 3 minutes, and it really must be respected. It also says here that the resin won't harden properly if the temperature is too low. So I guess if your room is really particularly cold, it might not cure properly. Then we talk about working time. So what does this mean? All epoxy resins start to cure after a certain amount of time from the minute you've finished mixing it. So each resin is different. For this resin, it's about 30 minutes or so after 3 minutes of mixing. This is by my calculations, but to be on the safe side, give your resin 30 minutes or so working time from the minute you've stopped your 3 minutes mixing. It's around the same time for most resins, unless your resin says otherwise. You need to be finished pouring by this time, because once the working time is over, the resin will start to cure and become very, very thick and sticky and almost impossible to work with. This is why preparation is important, so have everything ready so you don't use up your resin working time by looking for your glitter or a stirring stick, etc. So mixing your resin isn't as difficult as it looks, and I always use a kitchen scale to measure this out. I find it much more accurate. So for these two coasters, I will need around 50 grams for each coaster, so I need a total of 100. And as this is a 1-to-1 ratio, it's as simple as dividing the total into 2 parts. So for part A, I'm measuring out 50 grams, and go slow and gentle so you don't accidentally pour out too much. Now measure out the same quantity of the part B, which is the hardener. And if you don't manage to get the exact amount, don't worry too much about going under or over about a gram or so. This shouldn't affect the final result, but if you go slow, you should be fine. So stir for a full 3 minutes, no less, because if you do, the two parts, the A and the B, might not be fully incorporated together, and then your coasters might not cure correctly. So set a timer on your watch or your phone for 3 minutes and then get mixing. Mix the resin using clockwise and anti-clockwise movements, and make sure you scrape the sides and the bottom of the cup to incorporate parts A and B into the center. And then when this time is up, you're done. Now take your cups with the pigments you prepared earlier, and these cups are around 50 grams or 1.7 fluid ounce plastic cups, and fill them up halfway. You can pour the resin in by eye or use an electric scale for more accuracy. When it comes to mixing the powder and resin together, make sure you go slow. The two need to be well mixed together, or bits of powder may rise to the surface of your coasters. For the glitter and the ballerina glow, you only need 1 teaspoon of clear resin, and mix well. So I have this on a board. It's just a little wooden board, and it's so I can transport it in case I need to move it away from my work table. So I'm going to start with the mica powder, and I am just going to go around the rim just once, as close to the edge as possible. Then I'm going to take some white, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go around the edge around there. And I'm going to save some for the other coaster. Then I am going to take some clear, so this has got absolutely no pigment in. And I'm going to pour just a little down the centre, about there. Then I'm going to stop and I'm going to wait. For the next one, I am going to take the red, the wine red, and I'm going to do the same procedure all the way around the edge, like that, and try and keep it in equal amounts so that all sides of the circle have the same amount of resin. If you have any left over, you can scoop it out like this. Waste not, want not. And sometimes you may need to get down, right down below with a spatula. Or another tip is leave it on the side and it will start to flow out. And then you can add some later. Then we can put the white in again, and I like to just re-stir between each pour, just in case any of the powders sink to the bottom. You can always clean off your spatula in between cups so you don't mix your colours. And then let's get the rest of this red out. And you can see there's quite a fair amount on still, and I'll just add it again to the edge. Now don't worry if something like that happens, that all adds to the effect. And real agate slices are never perfect. Then we shall put some clear in the middle of that one too. And then you just wait and you leave it to do its thing for about 5 minutes. And then about this point you can start adding this little shimmer. So I'm going to get my spoon back and I'm going to place about I'm going to share this out, so about half of a spoonful in there and half of a spoonful in there. And then at this point I am going to zap it with a couple of zaps, very quick zaps. You don't want to burn your resin. And that's got rid of most of the bubbles. And the same for this one. So turn it on, a couple of zaps, and that should do. And then once again leave it for about 2 minutes. We don't want to use up all of our working time, but we do want it to do those lovely effects. Just going to correct that, just going to push it down. If there's any little bits that have floated inside, just take them out. There, I'm just touching it very lightly. And here I'm going to try and push that down. There's a bubble that surfaced there, and here as well. But very lightly. So you could leave it there and just leave it as it is, or if you wanted to you could add some glitter just into the middle. Now glitter is heavier than the other pigments, so a lot of the time it does fall down to the surface, but you could add a little now and see how much remains. And I like to add this with a spoon. And for this I'm going to use the underside of a spoon, which is over there. I'm going to take that much and I'm just going to plop it in the middle. And as I said, most of it will fall down, but some of it may float up to the top. And some in there. And you can use any coloured glitter you like. You could even use some gold leaf mixed about the same amount. A little bunch of gold leaf into some clear resin and add it to the middle. And then you're going to ask me, what do I do with all of my cups and all of my dirty spoons and spatulas? Do I clean them out? Do I not? No, you do not. This is what you do. You leave them on that bag upwards, somewhere at the end of a table where you know you're not going to move them all night long. And you just want to leave them exactly like that. And in the morning these will all be dried up and you can peel them off that plastic bag and reuse them. Try to make sure they don't touch each other. That's the easiest way to do it. And then you leave it completely all night. And that's how easy cleanup is. What I like to do at the end of a pour is to take a wet towel and just wipe off my gloves, and sometimes I can actually reuse these gloves. So wipe off all the resin. Usually these wet wipes contain some sort of alcohol base, and that's what gets the resin off, and then you can slowly peel them off and let them dry equally on that sheet of dustbin liner. And in the morning you may be able to reuse it. So here they are just starting their curing process, and they are now ready to be covered with the box, and I'm going to leave it there all night. On goes the box. This will prevent any pieces of dust or fluff or anything coming through your window or that's in the air getting onto the surface of those lovely coasters and ruining them. So that's the end of part 2. Join me in part 3 where I'll show you how to unmold your coasters, tidy up the edges, and then paint on some metallic gilding for some bling.